Okay, I'm making some deer tallow soap today, and I thought I would show you guys how to do this. And truthfully, this is the third batch of deer tallow soap I've made, and the third time I've tried to shoot a video on it. I can't stand hearing my own voice, so then I usually just delete it and don't post them. So we're going to try this again. This will be their third attempt, and so we're making deer tallow soap today. And we're making it, deer tallow comes from, obviously, deer, venison. When you are butchering your deer, and it doesn't just has to be if you're a hunter, because the way we humans live our lives with our cars and things like that, we have the potential of killing an animal that way. And even if we don't, because of the way we create our roads and things like that, and just because we want to get from point A to point B, and so we put a road there, means we put those animals' lives in danger. And that's just the way we live our lives. Like it or not, that's the way it is. And when an animal dies, in my opinion, it's good to show respect by using as much of it as possible instead of leaving it just to rot on the side of the road, where it's not even really going back to nature, it's just rotting on the side of the road, or worse, it's drawing other animals up to eat on the carcass, and then those animals are hit on the side of the road. So I personally find it to be respectful to use as much of the animal as possible. And deer tallow soap is just one more way of doing it. Now, soap making was traditionally done in the cold time of the year, usually from November to the end of January, so we're right there right now. And it was done after the final harvest. And the final harvest, for people who run farms or work with animals, have to kind of take over the role of Mother Nature, because we're taking these animals and making them live the way we want. So we take over feeding them. We have to feed these animals. It's not like they just, can go out and forage in the wilderness. Sometimes they can, but not all the time. So we have to feed them, and we have to provide any medical assistance, unless if we don't care and we just are going to let the animal die, or be injured and be stressed, and therefore give less meat or dairy or eggs or whatever we're using them for. And the other thing is that we have to make the hard decisions, just like Mother Nature does. Only 1 in 5 bear cubs lives to see a year. Only 1 in 7 wolves lives to see a year of age. Deer are even worse. It's like 1 in 36. Don't quote me on that number, but it's in the 30s or 40s. No, I think it's 36. I read that. Anyway, 1 in 36 deer fawns will live to be a year old. Nature cuts down what she can't take care of. And when you take over her role, you have to make those decisions too. So after the last bit of food, you gathered up all the food you can, you got it all in storage, you got it everywhere, grain bins and things like that, then you have to go over and see how much you have, and make the hard decision of how much food do you have compared to how many animals you can feed. And then how many animals do you have? And if you can only feed 10 animals and you have 12, you have to make the decision on which 2 are not going to go through the winter, or go to the next time there's feed anyway. And this is done usually by butchering. It's not a cruel thing. Actually, a lot of people say, well, that's so cruel to do that. But if you tried to bring all 12 of the animals through the winter, you would end up losing all 12 of them instead of just the 2. So soap making came after the final harvest. The animals are butchered, the meat is processed, and then you have all this suet, if it's beef, if it's suet and tallow for beef, and lard for pigs, and fat for most other animals. And then traditionally soap was made with animal fat. There is milk fat, but milk was such a precious thing. Milk fat was such a precious thing to most people who had it that they didn't use it for making soap with. They ate it, or they turned it into butter, or they turned it into cheese. It's nowadays, with our plentiful milk supply, that we can start turning it into soap. So usually most of our soaps were made with animal fat after the butchering time, and or after hunting. And this is just another way of using the entire carcass of a deer. Instead of just, if you hunt, instead of just taking the best pieces of meat and throwing the rest of it out back, which I've seen. I've also seen even worse where they just take the antlers and throw the rest of it out back. If you have fat, you can you take all the meat and you use it all, grind it up, turn it into jerky. If you're not really big on hamburger, venison jerky is really great stuff. And then you're left with a few other things. Take the bones, boil them down, make good bone broth that can be canned for later use. And the fat is something that you can use multiple ways. In fact, one of the things I've got over here, I'll show you. I'm going to be making deer tallow and beeswax candles, and I've got my forms already poured out. I have a little extra beeswax, and there's the last of the deer tallow down there. So you can make you can make tallow candles. Tallow is often used in salves because, as you can see, at room temperature it is hard. So you can heat it up, get it into its liquid form, put herbs in there, let the herbs really set in there for a couple hours. Just keep it very low heat, and then strain off the herbs. Let the tallow set up, and you've got salve. So, you can do many different things, and soap is one thing, and it's really easy. Soap is actually quite easy to make, and a lot of people make it like it's not, but it is. It's actually quite an easy thing to make. There are some precautions, and we're going to go over those in the next step here. We're going to go over, my next video is going to be on ingredients and precautions. So we'll go over that. But don't be worried about making soap. I talked to one gentleman who I very, very much respect, and he was shooting a video, and one of the videos he shot was that he stores his soap for, he's a prepper, so if bad things happen, he's got plenty of soap, because soap is needed for hygiene, and hygiene helps us from getting sick. So he stores his soap, and somebody asked him why he didn't make it, and he went on and on and on about how dangerous it was to make your own soap. And a lot of people believe that working with lye is a very dangerous thing. And while there are things you should do, you should take precautions with working with lye. Working with lye is much safer than driving a car. Working with lye is much safer than having a house that has electricity running through the walls. Working with lye is something that you should respect. You should know it has the potential to do you harm, but it's not like an animal waiting to jump and grab you. It's working with lye. You treat it with respect, and when you do that, you can work with it without a problem. And we're going to go on with that in just a little bit and show you just how easy soap making is, because I think there's a mystery to it, and it is quite easy to do. And if you're a hunter, it's kind of nice to be able to make your own deer tallow soap. And this is a small recipe, so if you have a small deer or you have a buck that doesn't have much fat to it, you'll probably still be able to get enough fat to make this recipe. So I'm going to get started here and go over the safety precautions and the things you're going to need to do it.